Tegla by Cassander Garduna. Chapter 1. Island Mentality. On Athlandrone, the island of the Driftwood people, life is taken in stride, and seriousness is reserved only for dire situations. This is the island mentality. King Migka-Narut, Prince Snala, and little Tegla sat on the beach this night, playing Ghouli's game as they watched the moon bring the tide in. Tegla had cards hidden in the inner pocket of her white and apricot-colored cloak. Snala had secretly shuffled the deck to his favor, and Migka, who was keeping score, had mistallied his points higher than either of the others. Amongst the Driftwood tribe, a good cheater is considered very clever and applauded for their skill. The trick, of course, is not to get caught. In many games, this would simply mean a reduction of points. Cheating itself is both expected and encouraged. Many fish tales have been told around the campfire by the most clever of the tribe about how they outwitted their opponent with sleight of hand, or how they manipulated a game of chance, and most important, how they did it all with a straight face. Tegla, young and inexperienced relative to her older competitors, fumbled trying to slip a card from her cloak. Both Migka and Snala noticed, but said nothing. They instead gave each other a knowing look and a simple smile. Migka also knew about Snala stacking the deck, but as the only one of the three able to do simple arithmetic, and that night's scorekeeper, the sly old king had won before the game ever began. When the game was over and Migka had won, Snala taught Tegla an important lesson about distraction and eye contact. If they're looking at your eyes, they're not looking at your hands, instructed Snala. So, wait for a distraction before you act, or better yet, create one. 1 second, the warm night air blew across their faces. The next, a cold breeze crept across the beach, and screaming could be heard across the island. Even in the subterranean tunnels, which scouts and hunters used to traverse the island, where many of the Driftwood tribe lived, including Migka and Snala, those screams could be heard. Even far north in the old cold, the spirits of the cold trembled and stirred as the scream echoed through the barren wastes. The three stood up, startled by the cry. "That is Nagku again," said Migka. "Soon the storms will come." "This is the third night in a row," replied Snala. "I fear the Etsutsa, the forgetting plant, is losing its effect, and the singers and drummers meant to calm him have begun only to annoy." "What plagues him, father?" "I couldn't say. The ascetic fights himself, a struggle between mind and spirit. When you were just learning to walk, he first appeared, lecturing to us night and day on a philosophy he called the rewilding. He told us that enlightenment would be found in the unlearning and unknowing, that knowledge itself is poison, and language a curse that binds us in chains of illusion. Some saw him as a madman, others as a teacher and a wise man who taught a lesson meant to be forgotten, and still others as a pagwari, a medicine man, meant to heal our hearts and past wounds with his teachings." "You said, when he first appeared. Do you mean to say he doesn't come from the island?" "He wouldn't talk about his past or where he came from, but said only that the island itself had brought him here, that it chose him to be its guardian, its avatar. I only know that several times we have seen large Anathari, stranger, ships, not far from shore. In a frenzy, I would rally the warriors preparing for invasion, but then all of a sudden an impenetrable fog would surround the island. I believe this to be Nagku's work. I think he may be our greatest weapon, but at the same time, if we cannot calm the beast, he may be our undoing." Chapter 2. A Jar of Sweet Water. The next morning, Migka gathered his council in a room beneath the earth. "The storms are getting worse. Something must be done," said Migka to the old faces before him. "How can we calm him when we don't know what troubles him?" asked one of the council. "Can he even still speak?" questioned another. "Soon we will all be underwater. Did you see the size of the waves this morning, King Minka? The deer doubled back on our hunters last night, chasing them back into the tunnels. Is this Nagku's doing? Sugla hollered, always the doomsayer. Calm down, called Migka in his biggest voice. We mustn't lose our heads. I have decided to send someone into the dark forest today to seek Nagku out and see if he can still speak, or if there may be some other way to ascertain what exactly is happening to the poor creature. Who will you send? Asked Prince Snala from the back of the room. Migka hesitated, but then a small voice spoke up. I will do it, said Tegla. Far be it from me to boast, but I am known across the island as the Driftwood tribe's finest scout. I can run swiftly and silently. I can hide in the shadows, and I believe myself capable of evading the beast if necessary. Are you sure, Tegla? You don't have to do this, said Migka in a fatherly voice. I feel that I must, not just for you, or my people, or this island we call home, but for myself. I want it to be known that Tegla Denami Nishgui, a jar of sweet water, is the very bravest amongst the Driftwood people. Live or die, this will be my legacy. So be it. Prepare yourself and head out at once. Report back as soon as you know something. As the chamber began to empty, Snala came up behind Tegla in the tunnel and laid his hand on her shoulder. Snala told her, Tegla, you will need a migwid, a mask, to filter out the smoke of the Atsutsa plant, or you may lose your wits. And here, take this whistle. Blow it if something goes wrong and you need help. Snala was renowned as a whistle-maker. Each one was enchanted and engraved with magical writing in the little moonfish alphabet given to the Kitka by a clever fish in a stream. No one but Snala himself, not even his father Migka, knew how the enchantments worked. This was a great honor for Tegla. She took the whistle in her hand, looked up into Snala's dark brown eyes, and softly whispered, Thank you. Tegla went back to her hut to grab supplies. She had a white and apricot-colored mask in the shape of a cat's face, whiskers and all, that matched the cloak she wore. She put a wet sea sponge in the muzzle of the mask, hoping it would filter out the smoke of the Atsutsa, which Nagku constantly burned. She tucked a small dagger in her belt, and put on her white rabbit fur moccasins. The whistle which Snala had given her had a hoop at one end, through which she put a string, making a necklace of the whistle, and put it over her head around her neck. She also smudged her face with white pine ash, a custom for scouts. She was ready. Instead of going directly into the dark forest, Tegla decided to make her way towards the center of the forest underground, through one of the tunnels commonly used by hunters. The way was lit by luminiferous fungi that clung to the walls of the passage, tended by particularly skilled tribesmen who did nothing else but keep the walls glowing with that blue light. Chapter 3. A Meeting with the Unlearning Beast. Now in the heart of the dark forest, without fear but rather excitement, Tegla's steps were swift and quiet like secret messages. There was a miasma of Atsutsa smoke which made it hard to see. Her mask only doubled this difficulty, obscuring her peripheral sight. Her breath was hot and wet inside the mask. The sea sponge helps, she thought, but she could feel herself growing ever lighter and lighter, and realized that some of the smoke must have been seeping through. The creeping vines which wrapped around the ancient pines seemed to twist and move like nervous snakes. Geometric patterns appeared in the bark of the pawpaw trees and the leaves of the nightjar bushes. The yellow of the hyalala flower seemed to shimmer, glow, and dance about as if to wantonly distract her from her quest, while other things remained as still as sleep. Thoughts and images, which felt significant for a second, burst into her mind's eye, disappeared, and were forgotten as quickly as they had appeared. She shook her head to shake off the influence of the smoke, but it was too late. All was a dream now, and she was an unwilling participant in the story. The insects sang the night in, and the moon's light trickled down the vast green of the dark forest, all waltzing shadows and ghosts that jumped in and out of existence, wanting both to be seen and stay unseen. Tegla, now forgetting what she had come there for, took off her mask, and sat quietly on the jutting root of an ancient tree. Time stopped under the tree. There was only now, and although this nowness was a fundamental belief of the tribe, it was somehow different here. To the tribe, the past was considered dead, and those that stayed there in their minds were like ghosts, and the future just shimmering illusions to be ignored. To the Driftwood people, time did not flow like a river, but instead sat still like a pool. You did not progress through time, but stayed always and forever in the endless present. Of course, even believing this philosophy, the tribe could clearly see the effect of one thing on another. The start and end of a day, the rising and setting of the sun and the moon. Tegla thought about this absence of time, and it occurred to her that it was possible that time had not stopped, but instead that this was an illusion created by the fact that she could not remember the moment before. And of course, this progression of time was anyway a false assumption of the mind made by memory and change. That must be it, she thought. "Climb, grandchild," a small voice spoke in her ear. "Who's there?" Startled by the voice, Tegla demanded an answer. "It's me, granddaughter. Hen Soma Fluga, the old firefly. The smoke is heavy and stays near the ground. You need to travel through the trees, my dear." Tegla then saw the yellow-green light of the firefly's tail out of the corner of her eye, looked over, and saw her savior sitting on her shoulder, a firefly, orange and black. "I don't know if I can. I feel so strange." "Then I will carry you, child." The old firefly grabbed the hood of Tegla's cloak, tugged, and suddenly she was airborne, rushing higher and higher into the canopy. The old firefly set her down on a large tree limb. Slowly, the dream abated, and reason returned to Tegla. "Thank you," she announced bitterly, with a great amount of reservation. "No need to thank me, grandchild, but I must be on my way. I've dinner cooking." Tegla's pride was hurt. This is not the story she had imagined, being saved instead of doing the saving. "Maybe this part of the story I will omit," she thought. A little more time passed, and the quest Tegla had been set on came back to her mind. "Nagku, I must find Nagku," she said aloud to herself, rising. The branches of the mammoth trees were so big in the Deniscode, the dark forest, she merely had to hop from one thick arm to another. She saw a flickering light in the distance, a campfire where the smoke was coming from. She knew then she was headed in the right direction, though still unsure what she might say to Nagku when she got there. "Maybe I need say nothing," she thought. She covered the distance quickly, and then rested herself on a tree limb above Nagku. Tegla watched the beast as it circled the fire in a well-rooted-out track dug in the dirt. He had looked like a man once, but his form had shifted over the years as he had gone through the process of rewilding. Once a regular man, one of average height with dark curly hair and an olive complexion, Tegla now saw a beast with a large, round, moon-like face. Black claws grew from black hands, gray and ghostly skin, teeth like that of a tiger, but twisting and jutting from the beast's maw. Large, wild, golden eyes that the campfire light bounced off of, and shaggy brown fur covered his gaunt torso. Tegla watched as Nagku stopped circling and crouched down beside the campfire like some great ape. He began to cry, and Tegla felt a harsh, cold breeze move in. The wind made the flames of the fire dance this way and that. A gust almost toppled Tegla from her seat, but she grabbed onto a nearby branch just before she fell. She almost sighed in relief, but would not so easily make a sound and give the game away. Nagku started digging up the dirt and grass in a spot close to the fire. He laid down in this spot, and after some time went to sleep. Tegla noticed the unused hut of obvious Kitka, Driftwood people, design, just feet away. Nagku began to toss and turn in his sleep, and the ground shook. He cried out, and thunder struck. The wind became violent, and the trees swayed in its grip. Old, dead branches detached and flew through the air. Eltfa, the volcano at the center of the island, began to rumble and stir. Black smoke sprung from its gaping mouth, clouding the night sky and blotting out the silver face of the moon. Nagku screamed again in his misery, and the cold wind blew over the tree Tegla sat in. She jumped at just the right moment and was unharmed, but now felt vulnerable in the open, on the ground, removed from her comfortable observatory in the trees. Nagku called out again, and red-hot blood of the earth burst from the mountain and trickled down its face. Several other trees fell around Tegla before she ran to Nagku in a panic. Wake up, Tegla hollered as she shook the twisted form now in her hands. Nagku's eyes opened, and Tegla immediately discerned her mistake. The flames flickered in large golden eyes that pressed upon her as if to undo her completely. The eyes stared at her, into her, and through her, not without some surprise and confusion, but still with utter disdain. Nagku's hand shot out like the dart of a striking snake, and Tegla was lifted from the ground in the claws of the beast, faster than age, faster than the fleeting nature of young love, and strong enough to lift any mountain. Never had Tegla witnessed such a force of nature. This being holding her was the volcano, the wind, the island itself. The animals of the island howled, squawked, moaned, growled from every direction. Nagku's mood enveloped the island, dictated the weather, and even moved the temperament of the animals. A thought sprang forth in Tegla's mind. The whistle! She groped at her chest and found it in her hand. She put it to her mouth and blew, and it sounded like a banshee's wail. Suddenly, she left Nagku's grasp and started sinking into the earth. She waved her hands in a frenzy, trying to grab on to any little thing, but her hands went through everything. She had become intangible. She quickly figured out that her movement was not according to her body or musculature, but instead her mind, her thoughts. She thought up, and up she went, at speeds unknown to her in physical form. In fractions of a second she was above the tops of the trees. She watched the beast look around, dismayed. She knew now that Nagku's nightmares were the cause of the turmoil, and remembered Migka saying to report back to him. But she thought how bigger the hero would she be if she had handled this herself. Chapter 4. The Masks That the Monsters Wear. Tegla but thought the word beach and found herself afloat above the white sands. She hovered close to the ground and blew the whistle again and was once more solid. She sat and contemplated the situation as she watched the waves approach and retreat. The sun began to rise, the night creatures went to sleep, and the day creatures rose to greet the morning. When she was younger, Tegla had seen a Pagwari named Druga Suti relieve warriors of night terrors by entering their dreams and giving them counsel there. Druga, like all Pagwari, lived in the swamps. If I could only enter Nagku's dreams, I could kill whatever nightmare monster is hunting him, she thought. I need the Pagwari, the healer frogman's, dream song. She put the whistle to her lips once again and blew. Druga's hut, she thought, and without any time passing, there she was in the wet of the swamp in front of his humble abode. Druga was just waking up and heading out to start cooking breakfast. Not yet knowing she was there, he discovered Tegla just outside the leather door of his living quarters. The frogman was covered head to toe in algae and swamp muck. He was short in stature and wore little clothing. His eyes were big and black, and his face was a pale green. Tegla, is that you? He said, wiping the sleep from his eyes. What brings you here? I am here on urgent business, she said with authority. I need to learn the dream song. The dream song? What for? Please, I haven't time for questions. Can you teach it to me? Sure I can, young scout. But first let me make some yaba, a drink not unlike coffee. We will need focus and energy. The song was in a language foreign to Tegla. Hours passed as they went over the words, rhythm, pronunciation, and melody, until finally Druga was satisfied with her singing. Stay here, said Druga, as he went back inside his tiny hut. In the hut he scribbled down the lyrics onto a piece of light brown parchment, thin as the membrane of a bat's wing. He wrote this song in the little moonfish alphabet. Both the language of the Kikanishquilanta and the Little Moonfish alphabet were a lie, made from magic, and thought to shape reality when uttered, whether spoken or written. It was commonly known that the pale blue traveler, the creator of all things, had spoken the world into existence. Language was extremely powerful, could move perception and the world around us, not just by the words we spoke, but also those words that ran through our minds. A wise man considered his words before he spoke, controlled his thoughts, and tried not to bring negativity into the world. To think positive thoughts was the way of the wise. Positive words and positive thoughts brought good things into the world. Don't sing the words too quickly or too slowly. Remember the pace we practiced. You must close your eyes and envision the person sleeping while singing the song. If done right, this will allow you to enter their dream. And take this paper. I've written the words down for you in case you forget. Thank you, Brugge. And for now, can we keep this between us? Tegla asked, pocketing the Pugwari's proffered paper. Brugge thought a moment, and, intrigued by the mystery and secrecy he had suddenly become a part of, he agreed. Certainly, Tegla, but once your adventure is over, you must come back and tell me the story. This is the deal. Tegla agreed, then once more blew the whistle Snala had given her. Up, she thought, and she rose into the air. She watched Brugge's expression and laughed as he looked around, wide-eyed and full of wonder, for the now invisible Tegla. She then thought, Nagku, and was instantly back in the smoky depths of the dark forest. Still in the air, she watched Nagku once again circling his fire, stopping every once in a while to add more adzutsa to the flames. It was twilight now, and soon Tegla saw the eye of the night rise into the dim sky. The beast seemed to move slower this night than the last. His face was sad and almost childlike now. Tegla found that she pitied him and held no grudge against him for the previous night. Any cornered beast will eventually attack, she thought. It's not really his fault. Once this is over, I'll not only be the greatest scout, but a hero to my people, and you, my friend, can get some sleep. They'll write songs about me. My story will be recorded in the scrolls of record, and I'll never be forgotten. Excitement and joy swelled up in Tegla's heart at the thought. Nagku seemed to be a creature of habit as far as Tegla could tell by watching him these 2 nights. Just as the night before, Nagku tossed dirt and grass in the shallow hole in which he slept, and then laid down. It was not long before Nagku seemed to be asleep, but Tegla waited a while longer just in case. She thought down, and descended back to the ground beside the wild ascetic. The cold winds started to pick up. Nagku thrashed about and moaned, and the ground shook. This made Tegla nervous for a moment, the previous night still fresh in her mind, but she swallowed that nervousness down and became calm again. She took the piece of parchment Brugge Suti had given her from the pocket of her cloak and began, in a whisper, to sing the dream song. She closed her eyes and imagined Nagku's face. She got to the end of the song, and for a moment before she opened her eyes she thought maybe she had sung it wrong, that nothing had happened, but then she realized she no longer heard the wind. Not knowing what to expect, she opened her eyes and found herself at sea, turbulent waves pushing her in every direction. The sea was the color of honey, the sky blood red, and the sun shone a brilliant shade of indigo. Unable to see a shoreline, she thought for a second about drowning and questioned the rules of the dream world. If I die here, will I die in real life, or simply be banished from the dream? She decided to swim for a while and search for shore, but there was no shore to be found. Her dream body did not tire, but she felt more and more that seeking out a shoreline was going to be a fruitless endeavor. At that moment, floating there in the endless sea of honey, she heard Nagku's scream coming from below her. She looked down into the depths, and instead of seeing the pitch black of the ocean, she saw light. She took a few deep breaths and dove down beneath the sea, kicking hard. One moment she was swimming down ever closer to the light, and the next she was falling. She landed on her stomach with a thud in the red sands of a vast desert. She scurried back to her feet in an instant and looked around to get her bearings. The honey-colored sea was now hanging above her as the sky. She watched small schools of silver fish move together like one body, and larger fish trying to catch them. Then she saw a leviathan, a whale, one unlike any she had seen in the waking world. It was dark gray in color, with sand-colored spots. As big as the biggest Kitka ship, it hung in this sky sea like a cloud, and she was momentarily in awe of its beauty. In the distance, she heard Nagku howl again, and by that knew which direction to head. She walked for an indiscernible amount of time, as time here was strange. Her mind went back to her experience with the Atsutsa smoke, this timelessness not dissimilar to that. She walked at a fast, steady pace, close to jogging, each step as silent as the last. Her skill as a scout was innate, thoughtless, built into her muscles. The desert seemed to end abruptly and change into a familiar-looking open plain. The Cielia Guelta, the tall grasses, sprung to mind. She tried to abandon that dark thought, but then, just over a small hill, there it was, a place Kitka children were warned about. The tall grasses seemed to spread out endlessly before her. Standing at its edge, she heard Nagku's cry coming from inside. She drew her dagger and entered. The grasses were taller than little Tegla, who was smaller and shorter than most of her people. She moved slowly now, hoping to sneak up on whatever was happening and observe before acting. The grasses seemed to grab and pull at her cloak as she pushed her way forward, and she could feel in her spirit the presence of a great evil here. She came to an open circle in the middle of the tall grasses, but hesitated to step out into it. Instead, she hunkered down and looked to see what she could see. Nagku stood in the center of the circle, and there beside him was a lovely woman dressed all in white. The Driftwood people were neither a beautiful nor handsome folk, even by their own standards. They knew and accepted, but still defied this. All depictions of the Kitka made by the Kitka in drawings or sculptures were idealized and false, what they wanted to look like, not at all how they actually appeared. The woman standing in front of Tegla was truly beautiful. She was tall and slender, with fair skin, long black hair, and rose-red lips. Her eyes were a magnificent shade of blue, like an open cloudless sky on a perfect summer day. Tegla heard her speak softly to Nagku, her voice pleasant as birdsong. "You are neither man nor beast. You are a monster. You exist in the liminal space between all things. Not this, not that, not here, not there. You wish to be alone, but feel so lonely. Unloved, unwanted, feared, but not respected. Rejected as a child, without family, without friends. Why do you exist, Nagku? You have no purpose. There is no meaning to your life. Everyone you have ever loved has abandoned you." Now Nagku wept, his black hands covering his face. His form shifted, and where once sat a man, now sat a little boy. The boy wore a long hooded coat that was far too big for him. He sobbed and wiped his running nose on his sleeve. "Ah, Knock-Knock, good," the chicken killer purred with a smile. "The ghost of Nagku's childhood, the ghost of the dimmest gold, the forever child, all alone, so alone. Where is your mother, Knock-Knock? Where is your father? They abandoned you, didn't they? Why? Because you were not a good boy, because you were strange, abnormal, rejected even by the other children. All alone, so alone. You're better off a ghost, you know. It suits you. You were born a ghost, dead in the womb. So fearful, afraid of everything, and with no one to comfort you. Remember waking up in the middle of the night from a bad dream, soaked in sweat, smelling of urine, calling out for a mother that wasn't there? wishing for the strength of the father you never knew? Who will teach you to be a man? No one. Who will teach you to be brave, to be strong? No one. Tegla could stand to listen no longer. Enraged by the abuse she was witnessing, she sprang forward. Tegla the Runt, cooed the chicken killer, turning her attention on Tegla. So nice of you to join us. What do you plan to do with that little dagger? Slay me? I am already dead. Can your small mind even comprehend my power? The might of all the souls I have trapped in the Cielo Vuelta. I feed off their misery. It fuels me, and it delights me. This idiot beast, too, will be mine, and in one blow I will doom the whole island to oblivion. Your stupidity, your arrogance, has brought you here alone. Do you ever shut up? Quipped Tegla, more bravado than bravery. You must love to hear your own wicked words. I know of you, chicken killer, she spat. You prey on the broken, but I am not broken. Your lies, your tricks won't move me, and I am not afraid. I don't have to trick you, insolent child. I only need keep him here. Right now, outside this dream, the island is being destroyed, and your people are hiding, huddled together underground like the worms they are. A rush of outraged anger overwhelmed Tegla's restraint, and she charged the monster. She lunged with the dagger, striking for the chicken killer's heart, but the blade passed through the viper as if Tegla was fighting fog. The monster laughed, a cackle that sent chills up Tegla's spine, and turned, dismissing her. You can't hurt me, foolish Kitka. Nagku's form shifted again, and he appeared as a young man. The chicken killer, having properly humiliated the young scout, fixed her malice back on the unlearning beast, but gestured at Tegla. This is who they sent to save you? A scout that cares more about her reputation than she does your life? Where are the warriors? Where is King Midkanavuk? Did you not once consider him a friend? The Kitka only placate you because they feel sorry for you. They still consider you Anathari, an outsider, and a madman. You're nothing but a burden to these people. That's not true, Nagku. Don't listen to these lies, shouted Tegla. King Midka was worried about you. We all were. We just didn't know what to do. Midka sent me to figure out the problem, to check on you, because he cares about you. I was supposed to report back to him. Those were his orders. But I'm a fool. I see that now. I thought I could do this alone. I didn't want to ask for help. My stupid pride clouded my judgment, but I'm asking for your help now. Please, wake up. Wake up and we will figure this out together. Wake up and I will come back with our greatest warriors, and we will make this liar eat her words. Nagku raised his head, looked into Tegla's eyes, and he saw the truth. For a moment, one precious, shining moment, the chicken killer's grasp on Nagku's mind slipped, and in that moment he willed himself awake. Chapter 5. What is Love and What is Hate? Once again in the waking world, Tegla and Nagku sat facing each other in the heart of the dark forest. Nagku's fire had mostly gone out, but bright red embers still remained. They looked around at all the fallen trees. The forest had been badly damaged, worse than the night before. In the distance, at Eltfa's peak, smoke rose. Ash was blanketing the island, falling down like gray snow. Nagku looked more like a man than he had the night before, though his hands were still black, with claws curved like fishermen's hooks, and his eyes were still golden and wild. There was a kindness in his face, and a calmness now which Tegla had not seen previously. Surprisingly, Nagku spoke. Thank you, young Kitka. This woman in my nightmares, I think she means to drive me mad. I can't fight her. I'm too tired and too broken. I haven't the heart or will left in me. His voice was low and raspy, but there was gentleness there, too. You needn't fight her alone, not any more. I will not abandon you. With the help of the magic whistle, Tegla made her way back to the tribe and directly to King Midka. She had been humbled by the chicken killer, and telling Midka of her mistakes humbled her further. But her pride did not seem to matter much to her any more. This flaw, which was at one time invisible to her, now seemed so strikingly evident and ridiculous. She had learned a valuable lesson and was better for it. Where only a day ago she refused to seek help, now she adamantly demanded it. Migka reprimanded her for her disobedience, but saw in her new growth and newfound maturity, so was not as harsh as he might have been. Every word the chicken killer had said was burned into Tegla's mind, and she replayed these words endlessly, looking for some chink in the armor, some slip of the tongue that gave the game away, some advantage to use against her. She said that the lost souls trapped in the tall grasses fuel her, that she feeds off their sorrow. Is it possible that we could release these souls and weaken her? Wondered Tegla. Migka responded, anything is possible. Perhaps we could simply burn the tall grasses to the ground. Every material thing to the Driftwood people was thought to have a spirit. It was accustomed to thank your shoes for protecting your feet, her bowl for holding your food, her blanket for keeping you warm. Yet the spirit of a thing could be corrupted. For example, language could be misused and an evil book written. The spirit of the paper, once the spirit of a tree or plant, would be tarnished and twisted against its will. To free this spirit, two things could be done. The first thing would be that the book, or the material of the book, could be reused to create something good. The second thing is that the book could be burned, freeing the spirit, sending it back into the cycle of destruction and creation to once more become something new. So in this way, burning the Cielo of Guelta made perfect sense to both Migka and Tegla. The spirits trapped there, the grasses, the land itself had been corrupted, and King Migka would see all emancipated on this very day. Prince Snella approached. Listen, my son, I need you to rally 80 archers. Have them collect arrows that can be set aflame, and march at once to the outskirts of the tall grasses, and wait for me there, Migka instructed. Yes, father, I will dispatch them immediately, responded Snella. Tegla, I think I have a plan. I need you to go back into the Dimaskog and retrieve 4 yum-yum monkeys, one for each of the 4 sacred directions. These small monkeys sleep in the canopy of the forest. You will know them by their vibrant colors, each striped from head to toe, and each stripe a different color, and no 2 monkeys with the same stripes. Yes, of course, I understand. Very clever, my king, Tegla said with a smile. The Yum-Yum monkey slept for 8 years at a time, only waking for 3 days to eat and mate between these 8-year periods. It lived in the dream world, was connected to it, and had a power there. It was said that if you slept with one of these monkeys in your hand, the monkey would become a dagger in the dream, able to slay nightmare monsters, or at the very least banish them from your dream. It was common for young Kitka to keep these monkeys as pets and sleep with them in hand at night. Tegla used her whistle and laughed right away. King Migka gathered and put on his best leather armor and finest gray cloak and headed for the Cielo of Guelta. There he met Snella and his small army. Snella was dressed for war in his green and brown snail armor. Snella, have one group take torches and light the outer part of the tall grasses. Have the rest shoot flaming arrows into its heart, and instruct them that no one is to go into the grasses. Now let's see what happens, commanded Migka. At once, father, Snella answered, moving away to fulfill his king's command. The tall grasses, bearing an abundance of old, dead, and dry grass, sparked easily. Before long, a giant fire raged. Migka had assumed that animals, rabbits and such, would retreat from the fire, but he was wrong. Nothing living seemed to call this cursed place home. The fire blazed for hours until nothing was left but smoldering ash. And then the ghosts appeared. Hundreds of them, some Kitka, and others that Migka thought might be the Gula Tuatha, a lost people that had lived on the island before the Kitka. The Gula had built strange houses and other eldritch architecture, some of which still stood on the island. The Kitka regarded these places as bad luck, and rarely went around them, much less inside. Still, there were the curious few. The Kitka had also found various books left by these people, none of which they could read, but they enjoyed contemplating the meanings of the elaborate illustrations. The ghosts seemed confused and wandered around in the hot ashes, until the pale blue traveler suddenly appeared and spoke. "It's time to go to the next world, my children," said the traveler to the ghosts. His voice was like music, beautiful, resplendent, and calming. This was not the voice of a man, but of the Creator of all things. He was love, compassion, and mercy. He was all the wonderful mysteries of the universe. He was the breath of life itself. He was composed of a bright, shining, pale blue light, but to describe him any more than this would be impossible. The traveler waved his hand, and a door appeared and opened. The ghosts began to go through this opening to places unknown until all were gone, and the door and the pale blue traveler vanished. For a long time, everyone was silent and still, dumbstruck and in awe of what they had witnessed. Chapter 6. Second Chances. Tegla was now in the treetops of the Demaskog, collecting the last of the 4 sleeping yum-yum monkeys. She carefully placed them in a medium-sized sack, but they didn't stir or wake. Night was approaching, so she used the whistle to swiftly rush back to the beach. When she arrived, Snala and Midka were waiting, along with Brugga, who, not having heard back from Tegla, had come from the swampland to the beach village to check on her. "I have the yum-yum monkeys," Tegla announced. "Good," replied Midka, then raised his voice. "Everyone huddle up." Once everyone had gathered close, he continued. "We need to quickly talk about our plan. She will expect you to come back, Tegla, but she may not expect us. This gives us an advantage, the element of surprise. War is not unlike a game, and the Kitka always cheat. We are going to ambush her. Hopefully she is weakened by setting the trapped spirits of the tall grasses free, but this is not a given. Also, the yum-yum weapons work on nightmare monsters, but I am still unsure if they will work on her. We can only hope. This may be our last chance. We can all move at once if we are touching Tegla when she blows the whistle," suggested Snala. "Okay, everyone put a hand on Tegla's shoulders. We are as ready as we will ever be." Surrounded, Tegla blew the whistle, thought Nagku, and in an abrupt manner, all 4 found themselves at Nagku's side. Night had come, and the Unlearning Beast was asleep in his hole. Tegla handed each party member one of the yum-yum monkeys. "Quickly now, we must all hold hands as Tegla and I sing the dream song. Close your eyes, listen, and envision Nagku," instructed Brugga, then took a deep breath and began to sing, leading Tegla through the song once more. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves in Nagku's nightmare. The honey-colored sea and the desert were gone. Now the tall grasses spread endlessly in every direction, like a sickness taking over Nagku's mind. The 4 moved silently through the grasses, communicating only with body language like a wolf pack, and because of Midka's clever thinking, each brandished a silver dream dagger that in the waking world were the yum-yum monkeys. Snala, side by side with Tegla now, whispered into her ear. "Remember what I said about the game the other night? We are going to need you to make a distraction while we circle around her and attack from behind." Tegla nodded in agreement, and they kept moving. Getting closer to the center of the tall grasses, they could hear Nagku's screams. In due course, they found themselves outside the circle of flattened grass where the chicken killer tortured poor Nagku. As Snala had said, the 3 circled around and waited as Tegla entered the circle facing the chicken killer. There was a notable change in her appearance. Once young and beautiful, she now appeared hag-like, hunchbacked, and hideous. The chicken killer locked eyes with Tegla. "The runt is back," the creature hissed at Tegla. "I bet you feel very clever having burned down my trap and setting my prisoners free. But the misery of this world is never-ending, and it sustains me. The tall grasses will grow back, and more people will be caught in my web. I am inevitable. You will die by my hands this night. In a trice, the chicken killer lunged at Tegla, lifted her by her throat with one hand. Seeing this, the other three sprang from their cover and attacked. They stabbed her repeatedly, but the daggers had no effect, and the chicken killer swatted them away with her free hand like tiny insects. I will rip off your head, girl, snarled the chicken killer. Nagku, help me, Tegla pleaded. You are our guardian. It is your purpose. You are stronger than her. This island belongs to you, and she is just an interloper in your domain. Whatever she has told you is a lie. The chicken killer squeezed harder, making Tegla unable to speak. Nagku looked up into Tegla's face. A lot of people had treated him badly during his life, but the Kika had always been kind. A rage quickly grew inside of him. Let her go, he commanded, rising to his full height. The chicken killer ignored him, thinking him too weak and demoralized to do anything. But as his anger took hold, his form shifted. He became larger and more fearsome, towering over the tall grasses and the chicken killer. Then, with one swift movement of his massive clawed hand, he grabbed his tormentor. As he lifted her into the air, she dropped Tegla and began to scream. He raised her up to his beastly maw and promptly bit her head off, then threw the body out into the tall grasses and spat the demon's skull out onto the ground before him. Tegla ran to him and embraced him, crying, It's time to go home now, Nagku. It's time to wake up. Epilogue. A Friendship Made. Once back in the waking world, Nagku stayed with the Driftwood tribe for a short time. They made merry, held celebrations in his honor, and even performed a ceremony to make him a member of the Driftwood tribe. The nightmare was finally over. Eventually, Nagku, needing his solitude, went back to his campfire in the dark forest. But Tegla visited him every day. The end.